Irrespective of whether your image started its life as a camera file or came via a scanner, these photos can all do with a little bit of sharpening to increase their overall appeal. Photoshop Elements has a range of tools that we can use for sharpening the image. In Photoshop Elements 5, the sharpening options have actually been moved from the filter menu, where they resided in the other versions, over to the enhance menu. So now we have just three options for sharpening. We have auto sharpen, which just applies a set amount of sharpening to the whole of the image, and it adds sharpness to the picture all over without any kind of manual control. So as an automatic process, this will add sharpening to your photo, but you don't have control over where and how that sharpening is actually added to the image. So now the picture is a little sharper, but we haven't been able to control the degree of the sharpness that's been added. So let's just undo that, edit, undo, adjust sharpness, and we'll just go back to the enhance menu and look at the other options. The older of the three options is the unsharp mask. It's been used by professionals for years now to provide a way of adjusting how the sharpness is applied to the image. So let's look at the unsharp mask and see how we can use that. We come up with a preview. Preview you can adjust to any part of the image, and we have three sliders. Amount is essentially the degree of sharpness that's applied to the image. Radius looks at the range of area that the sharpness is applied across a radius of pixels. Here, where the higher the radius that you work, the wider the range that the sharpness is applied. Most people use a small radius. Bringing the radius up too high will give you artifacts and will make these halo type artifacts around the edge of the image and will make the sharpening really obvious. So we'll just drag that down to just below 1. And threshold allows you to control where the sharpening is actually applied across the photo. Let's look, for instance, at the sky area in the image. I'm going to bring the sharpening level right up so you can start to see it pixelate in the background, and bring up the radius as well so it's very obvious. If I turn off the preview, you'll notice that that area in the actual picture itself is very smooth. If I click on it, it also show in the preview of the filter, it'll show you a before shot. If I let go of the mouse button, it shows you an after shot. So you can see how smooth the sky was and how spotty or dotty the sky is afterwards. This is not what we want to do in a smooth area of the picture. And think about skin tones. You don't really want to make skin tones more textured than what they already are. So the threshold allows us to control where that sharpening is applied. So as we move it up, the parts of the image where sharpening is applied is only occurring on the contrasty areas of the photo. So notice that we no longer have any sharpening in the sky, but we do have sharpening where there's contrast in the image. You can see it there. If I drag down the threshold right down again, sharpening across the whole of the image when it's at 0 levels. As I drag it up, say I drag it up to 15, then there has to be 15 levels of difference between one pixel and another. In other words, there has to be a degree of contrast before the sharpening is applied. Notice when I click on the preview how the sharpening is just being applied to the flag and not to the sky. So you can control where the sharpening is applied by careful adjustment of the threshold slider. I'm just going to drag down the radius now so that we don't get those halo effects anymore, and just drag down some of the amount so it's not too strong. Now the degree of sharpening that you actually apply to an image will be based on how you output that photo. So if you're going out to web or to a screen, or going out to an A4 or an A3 print, you'll actually apply different levels of sharpening, and you should do a test with the final outcome. In other words, make a print or look at your finished image on screen to see what levels of sharpening is required for that picture, because the same level of sharpening won't be required for all images. So that's the unsharp mask. I'm going to cancel out of that, and we'll look at the latest option for sharpening in Photoshop Elements 5. So we go to Enhance and down to Adjust Sharpness. Now it works in a similar way to the unsharp mask in that we have an amount value and we have a radius value. We don't have a threshold value, so it's a little more difficult to control where the sharpening is applied in terms of the contrast of the image, but we do have a couple of different options in terms of how the sharpening is applied to the photo. We have Gaussian blur, which is the same kind of sharpening that's applied via the unsharp mask, and we have lens blur, which is a new type of sharpening which has less artifacts and less halo effects when it's applied. So it's pretty much the one that you should use in that regard. Amount and radius are the same kind of sliders that we saw in the unsharp mask. More refined, when we select this option, it takes longer to process the image, but the quality is much better. And the last option we have is the motion blur. So if for any reason you have a little bit of sideways motion where the subject's been moving, or perhaps the camera has been moving, you were photographing say on the deck of a boat and the boat was going up and down when you were taking shots of the land, so there's a little bit of vertical motion, you would be able to select the motion blur, adjust the angle to account for the direction of the blur that you have in your photo, either subject blur or camera blur, and then adjust the amount and the radius to try and minimize that blur in your photo. Now of course any kind of sharpening won't make an out of focus image in focus, but it will improve how the image looks, the clarity of the image. It won't, when we're using motion blur, remove all motion from the image, but it will improve the clarity of the image. The Adjust Sharpness is the newest inclusion in the sharpening lineup for Photoshop Elements, and apart from the threshold control, it provides much better results than the unsharp mask. So try using the Adjust Sharpness option.